developed so there's something that you don't need a battleship to move around. They started out with very large generators, and they got it down to where they put these things that run off of propeller-driven generators that are on the aircraft, very much the way our electronic countermeasures devices, the radar jamming facilities are ran. They're pods that typically sit on the airplane, although the B-1 has the equipment integrated in the airplane itself. But for years, these radar jamming systems were pods that typically they hung on the end of the wings.
Like an AWACS.
Like an AWACS, yeah. AWACS is a surveillance, a radio surveillance deal. But either way, that's not what we're here to discuss.
Next.
Now, they launched the human factors research. They actually integrated it with the Pheonix project, which was still being carried on at the Brookhaven Labs. It had taken work from MKultra, had taken work from Wilhelm Reich, had taken work from many sectors, including the Philadelphia experiment, and they integrated this all into one super mind research project. And they finally developed the stealth technology so that they could literally synthesize the Earth references that human beings needed. One of the reasons they went nuts is that the human beings need the electromagnetic background of the Earth. When that bottle was sealed, like it was on the Eldridge, open-ended just a Montauk, and it became in the vortex, the electromagnetic background that we need, the Schumann resonances, the noise background of the planet, was lost. And people went nuts because of it. They had no basis. They didn't know where they were. And eventually, with all the high degree of electromagnetic fields, the mind broke. They learned how to synthesize that background and how to concentrate the fields into a bottle. So the inside, it was pretty much neutral and pleasant like the Earth. Of course, all the final reports were written. The final report, the last couple of paragraphs, spoke of that this is the first time we have definite, solid evidence that the mind of man is electromagnetic and that it can be influenced by electromagnetic fields from the outside, and that this maybe should be gone into as for crowd control, military applications. Congress said no, no, no. They didn't want it. Congress got the report on the early part of the Pheonix project. Congress supposedly thought they stopped the Pheonix project.
Is that public access information? I mean, is that
it is secret
FOI?
still.
Oh, it cannot.
It is secret still. See, the information comes very roundabout way from the investigation that Senator Goldwater reportedly did on this work. And these guys out of Brookhaven had already built their kingdom, so they wanted to keep it going. So somebody got the idea, let's go and talk to the military direct. So they went to people in the Joint Chiefs of Staff and said, hey, how would you like a weapon? You throw the switch, the enemy throws up their hands and surrenders. Of course, it was, yeah, I'd love that weapon. So they said, well, we can develop it. We have we have a start on it. But we got to do it in secrecy. Of course, the military was already quite familiar with secrecy. So it was launched as a black hole project, and the military suggested, well, you can't do it. They said, we can't do it at Brookhaven Labs because we're too much under scrutiny of the political government. You got any ideas of where we could do the research? We want to be close to Brookhaven Labs, Princeton, and MIT. So he said, well, we got this old Air Force base that's now deserted on the eastern tip of Long Island, Montauk Air Force Base. It's a small town. There isn't a lot of people in it. You can go out there and be pretty much secluded. Back then, in the early 70s, this was like 1969, 1970, I have to add to it. It was a small, sleepy little town. It wasn't big. It wasn't the vacation capital yet at that point. So the group said, great, that sounds like an excellent place.
Okay, and we're at what year now?
This is now about 72.
Okay.
It was decided to move it all out to the old Montauk Air Force Base.
Okay.
They went out there, they masqueraded as Air Force personnel. They brought some Air Force personnel in also at the same time. And they reactivated the old SAGE radar because it transmitted on the same frequency range that Wilhelm Reich used for his orgone studies. So it was decided to refurbish the old SAGE transmitter. It was there, it was usable. So they got the Air Force personnel in and refurbished it. Then they contracted with the company BJM that I used to work for, and I went out, I started to modify it and,
What is BJM specifically?
It's a military-industrial contract that we made radar jamming equipment.
Okay. So what's your background?
I'm essentially an electrical engineer. I have a BS degree, and my specialty was essentially receivers.
Okay.
As you can see, these are all receivers. I'm a fanatic on receivers and radio gear. So I was taken out, and my job was to modify the big old radar transmitter for this special purpose. It started out with what we call the microwave oven experiments, where they just took a human being, stuck him in the building, focused the big antenna on him, pumped out 100 million watts of power, and hooked the people in that radar beam. And they got it to the point where they could actually type in a command to the computer, and the computer would pulse the transmitter, and the person would do it to some extent.
So there were triggering mechanisms in the brain.
Don't know if it's the brain direct or the psyche. See, here we're getting to the question: is your intelligence in the brain, or is it some quantum function that's outside the brain? I personally believe the brain is a computer interface and that your intelligence is outside the brain. Because there are documentation of a number of people existing without a brain. Brain dead.
They don't laugh so much.
To continue on the Montauk story, they had developed the microwave oven experiment to the point where they got it. They could type in a command, they could get the person to act like a chicken or whatever it is. Of course, Duncan here was one of those research people that they hit with this. Why someone didn't realize that this would burn out the person's brain, I don't know.
Cluck.
And it was finally realized, well, if we turn the antenna around, the non-physical energetic component go through the antenna, and the burning rays would be reflected off into the atmosphere. Of course, they had to route jets away because they shot down a few jets possibly. This thing, you have 100 megawatts of power going out in the air, and the airplane flies too close. It's going to knock out all its avionics equipment. But that was easily to be arranged. In fact, that can be documented today that the old SAGE site in the 70s was off limits to airplanes, especially east of the SAGE site.
By SAGE site, you're referring to? The
Montauk base.
Okay.
They didn't know where you would run into the UHF beam that would wipe out avionics on the airplane.
Or the alien beam from the 400 megahertz blast. That's another story.
And
it's also off limits today after 4 o'clock, and there are no aircraft warning lights on the transmitter.
Aircraft?
There are no aircraft warning lights on the transmitter tower, and it's we've been told it's off limits after, I believe, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Really?
That's when they turn on the existing equipment that they're still using. But they realized that they had a system which they were able to enter the mind of a human being by typing in computer commands. Now, at the same time, this group had heard of some of the alien interchange, the alien research. They heard that the aliens had a chair deal, that you could sit a human being in and it would read out everything that's in his mind. Of course, they were very interested to interface that into the computer. Hey, we had a computer that could take thoughts and make them real, manifest them. So what they wanted to be able to do was sit Duncan in a chair, have him concentrate on Tom Tulene here. Tom Tulene acts like a chicken, and Duncan would visualize, create in his mind a virtual reality where Tom Tulene is acting like a chicken. This would go through the computers, go out the transmitter. It would spread out, would find Tom like a radionics. It would converge on Tom, and Tom would be compelled to act like a chicken. This is essentially what they did. They made essentially a mind amplifier.
There would be enough horsepower to overtake a person's normal defense system, and the person would become subjective to the format, the work duty that was presented.
They'd be controlled.
But is it your mind interfacing with my mind?
Yes,
or
or
is
no.
it some collective mind?
It would be an artificial presentation of instructions to do work which would integrate with
my mind, with my normal electrical functions in my brain?
Your brain, your auric field, your spirit, soul, and if it's strong enough.
So it's more on a level of energy, physical energy, not...
Absolutely.
It's nothing physical.
Yes.
Energetic / electromagnetic, which in this reality form are highly structured and based into. Sure.
Interesting.
So you finished, Duncan? To continue. Yes, he's not finished completely.
No.
But to continue, they developed a mind amplifier where a person such as Duncan, who's been trained in a virtual reality project, something very similar to the Lawnmower Man movie, would be trained to actually visualize something and create in his mind a full, complete physical reality known as a virtual reality. He would be sat in that chair. The radio equipment, the computer equipment, the transmitter equipment would pick up that virtual reality by a group of coils and different kinds of sensors. We'll go to a massive computer bank. The computer will align it, stabilize it, all that good stuff, control it, store it. The computer would then feed it to the actual radar transmitter, which would transmit out electromagnetic equivalent of what we call thought form in the metaphysics field, and transmit this thought form out at lots and lots of CW power. We believe today the CW power output of the Montauk project was in the order of 100 megawatts or 100 million watts, and the pulse power was up in the terawatts. Terrorize people. But terrorists
But they needed something to control it as well, so they must have been using a computer system,
yes,
very advanced.
Very advanced. They used a Cray 1 computer feeding, they used multiple Cray computers for multiple chairs, feeding an IBM 360 or 370, the biggest one IBM had. And then this fed a very specialized radar computer that was built by AIO in Long Island that interfaced to the actual transmitter and controlled the pulse modulation, the frequency hopping of the transmitter. And then we went out through all stages, above ground first and underground, back above ground to the big antenna, and transmitted out the big antenna. What they noticed is this thing had enough power they could actually materialize things. In other words, if Duncan could form something in his mind, this thing had the power to actually bring it into physical reality and materialize.
Through the system at the end of the process, it would occur.
It could actually, if he thought of a can of beer, it could create that can of beer and you could drink it. So he was trained to actually visualize something in its entirety. And what they were experimenting with was precipitating or materializing objects around the base. My favorite was a can of Budweiser beer on the base commander's desk. The base commander liked Bud. So they showed Duncan a picture of the base commander's desk in his office, and he would visualize in his virtual reality a can of Budweiser beer sitting on that desk. Sure enough, it would appear on that desk. And the guy could drink it, it didn't poison him or anything. He said it was very good. It was better than typical Bud was.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But they noticed a peculiarity here. Something very peculiar was happening. He might concentrate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The can of beer might appear 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, anywhere in that stretch. It would be out of real time. So it was realized, hey, this thing will bend time. Of course, they got all excited over that. And they sent the whole group of us technical scientific people out to study time. They told us, learn everything you can about time, how to control it, what it is. This was like 1979. By 1981, we had modified the system so we had a working time tunnel, a working time portal. Duncan here, and we think there may have been one other psychic used for the time. Duncan here has multiple time references, and which he can speak on in a bit, because we're almost to the end of the project, where he could actually visualize another time, and he would have a personal connection through these multiple time connections to actually visualize that exact time that he was trying to visualize. Means if he visualized 1800,